Former United States President Donald Trump won the South Carolina Republican primary on last Saturday with almost 60% of the vote. I get reaction today from Dorchester County Republican Party Chairman Stephen Wright for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Dorchester County Republican Party Chairman Stephen Wright, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Good morning, Quintin. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I appreciate it greatly. I'm bringing you back on Quintin's Close-Ups because obviously we're here to talk about the 2024 South Carolina Republican primary, which happened last Saturday. And let me take you to the Wall Street Journal, and this is coming from Columbia, South Carolina, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit here. Former President Donald Trump won the South Carolina Republican presidential primary Saturday evening, defeating former South Carolina governor and former U.S. ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, in her home state. The article goes on to say that the Associated Press called the race for former United States President Donald Trump just after the polls closed. And with 99% of the estimated vote tabulated, President Trump actually led Nikki Haley 59.8% to 39.5%. So let me ask you this, Stephen. What is the biggest difference from last Saturday to right now in your mind?
Well, I think as we saw last night in Michigan, President Trump once again had another resounding victory. I believe he had achieved well over 60% of the vote. I haven't seen the final tallies yet, but last night when I had seen it, it was well over 60%. And he had a resounding victory here in South Carolina. I think the overwhelming message that I see is that the Republican Party is united behind the former president. The party wants to move forward with him as our nominee, and the party wants to make sure that Joe Biden is a one-term president because our country cannot afford 4 more years of his devastating policies in the White House.
You say that the Republican Party is united behind President Trump, but are actual Republicans united behind President Trump?
Absolutely. In fact, in South Carolina, there hasn't been a final analysis done, but speaking to my counterparts around the state, we believe there was about a 10 to 12% crossover vote of Democrats voting in the Republican primary. And as a Republican, one thing I can say is you can't expect to win the general election if you're appealing to Democrats to come and vote for you in the Republican primary. The whole purpose of our primaries is for party members and people that identify as Republicans to choose our nominee to go against the Democrat nominee. And so if you take away or you back out the crossover vote, President Trump's margin of victory would increase by possibly 10 to 12% in South Carolina. And I know in South Carolina, being a Republican voter, I received text messages from all these different groups encouraging crossover voting into the Republican primary. And like I just stated, I believe if you want to win the Republican nomination, you should win it with Republican votes because that's the key to winning the general election in November.
So how many crossover Democrats were there in the primary in Dorchester County?
Like I said, we are still in the process of analyzing our numbers. I don't think it was as widespread in Dorchester County, but if you look in Charleston County and you look in Richland County, and both those counties are very blue counties. Charleston is working hard to flip their county back red with the strong leadership of the Charleston chairman, Andrew Boucher. But Beaufort County is a Republican county, and my counterparts down there, they expect at least 10 to 12% crossover voting. But in Dorchester County, it wasn't as high as other counties. President Trump won our county overwhelmingly. But like I said, if you want to be a Republican nominee, you should be appealing to our voters in order to achieve success.
I want to get back to that in just a second, but and I know you just mentioned just a second ago about the crossover Democrats that, obviously helped a certain candidate in the particular primary last Saturday. But President Trump won 20 by 20 points when the polls had him winning the primary with 30. So in all of these primaries, President Trump wins, but he's not actually getting the large margin predicted by the polls. So what gap does he and his team need to close before November gets here?
Well, when you look at these primary results, you see that there were areas within the state, some suburban areas that President Trump underperformed in. And those are coalitions and constituencies that we have to bring into the fold as Republicans in order to win a national election. We've heard this argument before. But I think the reason the polling was off was because when you are polling for a Republican primary, you're polling Republican voters. And I don't believe the pollsters were reaching out to Democrats to see if they plan to play in our primary. And so I believe that would probably be the best indicator and answer as to why he won by 20 points versus 30 points.
Is it voter complacency the problem with him?
No, I don't think so. In South Carolina, we actually broke the record. If you look at our turnout in 2016, which was a much more competitive primary, you had President Trump, you had Senator Cruz and Senator Rubio, you had former Governor Jeb Bush. That primary was a heck of a lot more competitive than this primary, but yet Republicans turned out in larger numbers in this primary. And so I don't think it's so much of a complacency issue. You typically have lower turnout in primaries across the board. Our turnout was certainly much better than Democrats, if you look at what the turnout was in South Carolina for President Biden. But we have to realize in South Carolina we can't get complacent. We have to realize that this is going to be a competitive race, not only for president, but races up and down the ticket. And we need to identify our voters and get them out to support our Republicans and make sure that we win in 2024.
What voters are you identifying right now before November?
Well, one thing that the Dorchester County GOP is doing is we are going to get the list of everybody that voted in the Republican primary for president. In Dorchester County, we had a little over 20,000 people vote. And so we want to identify those people, not only to identify them as potential voters, but get them involved in the party. The only way we will be successful as an organization is if we have a strong team supporting our candidates. And so we are already working to identify our voters, to educate them on our party platform and on the candidates that will be running. And we will be rolling out a comprehensive victory program in the summer to make sure that we win elections up and down the ballot. And in Dorchester County, we're not only defending our currently held seats, but we are aiming to take House Seat 102, currently held by Representative Jefferson, and we're aiming to take back or take Senate District 39, which is currently held by Senator Stevens. We believe both those seats are flippable, and we are going to be expending a great deal amount of resources in those seats to flip them to Republican in 2024.
What resources do you have now?
Right now, we are in a very strong position financially. We, of course, have a lot of people involved in the party, but we will be doing even more extensive fundraising. We will be partnering with other organizations because, like I said, our goal as an organization, our number one priority is we are an election organization. Our goal is to elect Republicans. And so in Dorchester County alone, we have over 20 Republicans that will be on the ballot in 2024. All of our countywide officers, all of our senators, all of our House members. And so we need to make sure that they have the full support of our organization in order to win. And we will begin investing in those candidates right after the June primaries.
And going back to last Saturday, Stephen, Nikki Haley said this, quote, "I don't believe Donald Trump can beat Joe Biden," unquote. So okay, let me ask you this then. Do you believe that voter complacency becomes a problem for him in key, swing states?
I think if you look across the country, there was a poll, an Emerson poll that came out yesterday that had President Trump beating Joe Biden in 7 swing states, from 3 points all the way up to 6 points. And so if you look at the Trump base, they are very enthusiastic to vote for President Trump and put him back in the White House. You don't see that enthusiasm with the Democrats. You look back at Michigan last night where, a lot of people, I think it was nearly 100,000 people voted to not support President Biden. And so we have a lot of enthusiasm for the former president. But at the end of the day, as I stated in the beginning of our interview, winning elections is about building broad coalitions. We have to bring back into the fold voters that we have lost over the last couple of cycles and make sure that they understand the stakes of this election and the policy positions that we have as an organization or as a party that will benefit their lives and make America stronger in the future.
So how many voters have you all lost in the past 4 years?
In Dorchester County in South Carolina, it really hasn't been that many. But if you look across the country, like I said, we have some folks, suburban voters that we've got to work on, college-educated voters that we've got to work on. Really what you've seen across the country is a shift. Those college-educated suburban voters used to be hardcore. They'd vote for Republicans. And then the more working-class voters would vote for Democrats. Well, now you see a shift where the working-class voters are voting for Republicans and the college-educated voters are voting for Democrats. The key is I believe those college-educated voters that are voting for Democrats, we need to have a message for them to let them know and make it clear the stakes of the election so that they make the right choice in November. Because we must build a broad coalition, adding to our current coalition in order to win the general election. If you look at the results of 2020, President Trump just has to win 2 of the states he lost in 2024. If he flips Georgia or Pennsylvania or Michigan or Wisconsin, 2 of those states, Arizona, he will be the next president of the United States. So we have a much wider path, I believe, than President Biden does. And at the end of the day, I have not met an enthusiastic Democratic voter for President Biden. So we'll have to see. We don't even know if he'll be the nominee.
Now, going back to those college suburban voters, as you mentioned, that are coming from Democrats to Republicans, when was that shift? When did that shift take place?
I think we've seen the shift take place over the last few cycles. It probably began in 2018 and continued in 2020. So we've got to drill down and have an honest discussion with ourselves as Republicans. I firmly believe in transparency and honesty. We have to figure out why are we losing those voters and then find a solution to bring them back in the fold. And that is what my focus will be here in Dorchester County. I want to make sure that every person is well educated, understands our positions, and will support our ticket, because when we win, our state is better off, our nation is better off, our community is better off. And at the end of the day, I don't believe these voters support President Biden. I don't believe that they support his open border policies or his lack of leadership on foreign policy or his economic policies. We are all feeling the strain of the consequences from his failures. And it's our job as Republicans to message to those voters why they should support us.
And I want to go back to that last interview I did with Charleston County Democratic Party Chair Sam Scott. He basically told me that President Biden has made the economy strong.
Anybody that is living in America realize that is a delusion of reality. Gas prices under President Biden, while they have fallen, were the highest ever on record. Inflation under President Biden was the highest it had been in over 40 years. I read a study recently where the average American family is having to pay $1,000 more a month because of the increased cost of living. And so the simple fact of the matter is Democrats can attempt to message this as Bidenomics, which, by the way, if the economy was going so great, they would still be talking about Bidenomics. But we've seen the president veer away from that talking point because Americans are not feeling the tangible benefits of his economic policies. Republicans continue to be laser focused on ways to lift everyone up, ways to grow our economy. And that will be the clear focus if we're able to win majorities in the House and the Senate and win back the White House in 2024.
And how do you quickly lift that economy in Dorchester County?
Well, in Dorchester County, we are very blessed as a region, really, because we have a lot of industry and people moving here. But in Dorchester County, we have a lot of industries that are moving here as well. Our county council is working very hard to recruit more industry to provide high-paying jobs to those that live here so that we can resolve some of our infrastructure issues. Dorchester County is what we call a bedroom community, where a lot of people live here, but they work outside of the county. So we're trying to bring those jobs here, not only so it grows our local economy, but it can help with our local infrastructure issues where people are having to travel out of the county. If we can keep them here, we can alleviate traffic throughout the county and throughout the region.
And I'm going to hope to get one of those Dorchester County Council members back on Quintin to talk about that in depth. But going back to President Trump, as I was looking at the numbers on Saturday, Stephen, I kept asking myself, why is he not expanding his personal base, nor his broad electorate?
Well, if you look at the numbers of the people that turned out and you look at the exit polling, President Trump won the independent voters, he won the women voters, and overwhelmingly he won statewide. He won most of the suburban voters. So he has, in the primaries, expanded his support, but we have to do better. We have to do even more expansion because we are going to need every single vote in order to win this election. We realize that this election is going to be tight, and the way that we do that is having a strong ground game, having a strong message, and of course having a strong candidate on the ballot.
Now, Nikki Haley says that. Well, she says and that brings me to my next point. If Haley can't beat President Trump, and as she says, President Trump can't beat Biden, then why is she running?
Well, that's the ultimate question that you have to ask to her. In order to beat Biden, you have to beat Trump first. And began the field with 14 people. We're now down to 2. And none of those 14 people were successful in coming anywhere close to President Trump. I tend to think that the Republican Party and people across the country want to give President Trump another chance. And the reason they want to do that is because they realize under his leadership, we were strong economically. Our enemies didn't test us. Our border was secure. We were energy independent. And so we need to rally around President Trump. I don't see a path to victory at all for our former governor. And I think the longer that she drags this process out, the more resources President Trump has to expend winning elections, when we should be fully focused on President Biden and making sure he is a one-term president.
Do you believe, Stephen, that she's actually holding out on hopes of actually getting votes, say, from more centrist states?
That is possible. I mean, if she's willing to court the vote of Democrats in South Carolina, I bet that she probably is willing to do that in other states. But if you look across the country, there is not one state that she is leading in. There's not one state that she's within 10 points of President Trump. And so I can't speak for her campaign or her overall strategy, but what I can speak to is the fact that it's going to take every single resource to beat President Biden, to make sure he doesn't win again. Our country is on the line, and now is the time for Republicans to unite behind President Trump, because he's clearly going to be the nominee.
Do you believe that her goal is actually to redirect votes to the Democrats?
I don't know what her goal is. I think the longer that she stays in this race, the more it hurts President Trump, because we need to, as I said, conserve our resources and be fully focused on getting our voters out in November. And this primary is over. She hasn't won a state yet. She hasn't come close in a state yet. And the longer that this drags out, the greater resources President Trump has to shell out in order to make sure that he wins the nomination. And I think at the end of the day, you saw in South Carolina, I believe she spent close to $20 million. He spent $1.5 million, and he still won by 20 points. At the end of the day, if you can't win your home state, which never in history has somebody lost their home state and went on to win the nomination, we have to begin to ask ourselves, what is the end goal? And our end goal should be to make sure that Joe Biden is a one-term president. That should be the end goal of every Republican in the country.
But to be fair, Stephen, Haley, from some of the numbers I actually saw, actually outperformed. Some polls had her for weeks down 30, 35 points. So was Saturday really not a big night for President Trump?
Saturday night was a huge night for President Trump. If we remember, Governor Haley set the standard. Her expectation was that she had to improve upon her performance in New Hampshire. She didn't meet that expectation. In fact, she fell short of it by about 4%. And as I stated before, a lot of her votes across the state, I don't know what the full analysis will say, but we're predicting between 10 to 12% crossover. So if we had closed primaries, that outcome would have probably more closely aligned with the public polling that we saw in heading into the primary.
As you just mentioned, she got some votes from Democrats. Should she be censured for pandering to Democrats?
I don't think so. Ultimately, the purpose of a censure is basically to reprimand a member of the body. Our Robert's Rules of Order prohibit censuring of people that are not members. It doesn't mean that we should publicly condemn it. I've done so, and I will do so right now with you. I think that if you want to win the Republican nomination, you should be trying to win it with Republican votes. You can't expect to win the presidency by winning the nomination with Democrat votes. And so at the end of the day, we need to be fully focused on getting Republicans out to choose our nominee. And I condemn any actions by any candidate trying to use Democrat voters in order to achieve a victory for the Republican nomination.
And speaking of which, and this is the last question here, but speaking of your nominee, Charleston County Democratic Party Chair Sam Scardon told me a week or so ago on Quintin's close-ups this about President Trump, quote, "He is extremely dangerous. He has violently challenged the results of the election. He's been indicted 91 times criminally. And the contrast is extreme. He says that your candidate is an extremely dangerous candidate." So when you hear this, what do you say?
I would ask Sam to get out of his Democratic bubble and go speak to regular Americans, because I don't see any American talking about President Trump being extreme. What I hear them saying is that Joe Biden is a weak and feckless president who's wrecked our economy, who has failed to lead on the world stage. If you look at President Biden's term in office, every single year we have entered a new foreign conflict. It began with Afghanistan in 2021. It continued with the Ukraine in 2022, Russia invading Ukraine. It continued with Hamas attacking Israel in 2023. The question that we have to ask ourselves is what happens in 2024? America cannot afford a weak commander in chief. And if you speak to the average Americans out there that will determine this election, they're not buying the rhetoric from Democrats. They want somebody that is going to lift them up, that is going to give them an opportunity to succeed, that's going to secure our border and make our nation more prosperous.
And I forgot to ask you this, Sam, going back to last week's primary, but what is the biggest difference between President Donald Trump and Nikki Haley as far as issues?
I think the biggest difference is the direction. Governor Haley, she achieved many great things in South Carolina, but the people of South Carolina stand firmly with President Trump. And if you look at, the biggest difference, I think Nikki Haley represents the Republican Party of the past that appealed to corporatism and what the corporate interest wanted. President Trump very clearly does what he believes is in the best interest of the country and cannot be bought. And so those, are some of the clear differences, but some additional differences are foreign policy. Governor Haley is clear in her positions about being a hawkish Republican. President Trump was a strong, solid leader when it came to foreign policy, and America did not enter one foreign conflict under his leadership. We don't need a commander-in-chief that will hastily get us involved and entangled in foreign conflicts. We need to be squarely focused on an America-first foreign policy that protects our nation and also puts our enemies on notice without escalating conflict around the world.
Do you believe she's actually a Republican now after what happened last week, Saturday?
She is running as a Republican. She served as a Republican. She hasn't said that she's not a Republican. I believe she is a Republican. At the end of the day, we have a diverse coalition within the Republican Party. We are not like the Democrats and all believe the same thing. And so, like I said, what we've got to do as a party is bring in all Republicans to support our nominees so that we can be successful. Bring everybody in based off of the core tenets of our party of limited government, low taxes, individual freedom and responsibility. If we do that, we will be successful in 2024.
Dorchester County Republican Chairman Stephen Wright, thank you for your time. And again, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you, Quintin. Have a great day.
Likewise.